It's time for another discussion of literary terms. This week, theme. When I ask my students what they think theme means, they usually say something like the moral of the story or the lesson behind it. And it's a little more complicated than that, but that's close enough for a classroom discussion. A theme is the underlying message in a creative work. It's sort of the big idea behind it. And big is the operative word here. If somebody learns a lesson in chapter 3 and it never comes up again, it's probably not a theme. Themes recur throughout. Short works like fables will probably only have room for one theme. Little Red Riding Hood? Don't talk to strangers. The Tortoise and the Hare? Slow and steady wins the race. The Ugly Duckling? Ducks are racist. Longer works, of course, have room for multiple themes. William Shakespeare's Hamlet, for example, is usually considered a revenge play. The play has 3 sons in it, each looking for revenge for the murder of their fathers: Hamlet, Laertes, and Fortinbras. Spoilers for a 400-year-old play. Hamlet gets his revenge, but he dies. Laertes gets his revenge, but he dies. Fortinbras does not get his revenge, and by the end of the play, he's taken over Denmark. It's pretty easy to look at Hamlet and say that the theme is probably revenge ain't all it's cracked up to be. That's a direct quote from Shakespeare, by the way. Of course, that doesn't mean that there aren't other themes in Hamlet as well. The play also has a lot of things to say about trust and the lack thereof, the tenuous relationship between appearance and reality, and the way that mental illness was viewed, at least in Shakespeare's time. Did Shakespeare necessarily intend all of these themes? Probably not. Shakespeare's overriding theme when he wrote the work was probably more along the lines of, will this play help me make rent next month? But that doesn't make the themes invalid. When it comes to theme, I have 2 pieces of advice, one for writers and one for students and educators. Writers, don't go into a story with theme in the forefront of your mind. There are a lot of examples out there of stories where the writer started with a theme and then just kind of wrapped a plot around it. And very often this does not work well. You wind up with bland, cliched, preachy stories. Nobody wants to be lectured to, even if the theme happens to be one that they agree with. It's better to tell your story first. Develop your plot, develop your characters. Then take a look at the story that you've created and figure out which themes come through naturally. Then on your second draft, go in and make those themes more prominent. Story first, theme somewhere else down the line. Educators and students, you've all seen this meme, right? The one about the blue curtains? I hate this meme because it either means that the person who made it had a very overbearing teacher, or the person who made it wasn't actually paying attention to what the teacher was saying. Frankly, it could go either way. The thing to remember is that theme should be subtext, which means that it's often open to interpretation. Sometimes an author intends a theme, sometimes they don't, but as long as you can find evidence that supports what you think the theme is, then your interpretation is valid. Whether it was intentional or not, the most important thing is what you, as the reader, take away from the story. The only time I draw the line here is if the writer's intended theme is obvious, especially if it's something that the writer talked about publicly. Even after a writer says what a story was about, some people try to argue it, and when that happens, I will side with the author every single time. Ray Bradbury's dystopian novel Fahrenheit 451 is about a future where books have been outlawed and firemen actually burn down the homes where books are found. A lot of people read this book and assume that the intended theme is about censorship, which is a logical assumption to make. Bradbury, on the other hand, said later on in his life that the intended theme wasn't actually about censorship at all, but rather about people who choose to remain willfully ignorant. The characters in the novel, after all, were happy that the books had been banned. Once you hear that that's an intended theme, it's not hard to find it in the book. There is a story, though, that once he was on a college campus giving a lecture, and some of the students actually stood up and tried to argue with him about the theme of his own novel, insisting that it had to be about censorship, to the man who wrote the book and said that it wasn't. That'd be pretty presumptuous of anybody. On the other hand, an unearned sense of intellectual superiority is kind of an ongoing theme and part of the whole college experience, so I guess it's kind of fitting. So, Eddie, where should people look for my books?
Amazon!
See if you can find a theme.